One of the first questions I always get is, how does solar work? Well, guess what? It works the same on every home, no matter where we put the panels. So whether you got a big, long, skinny rambler, or you got a little tiny house in the middle of town, or you're in a subdivision and every house is tilted a different direction, it doesn't matter. We're going to be able to solve it for you. What if your house is surrounded by trees? Well, let's go in the backyard, put in what's called a ground mount. We'll find a place to put those panels. Don't want them on the ground? We'll put them on your shed, right? In fact, there used to be a tree right there where that shed is. We tore down the tree. It was old. It was dying. They tore down that tree. They put in the garage, and then they put the panels. And the whole project got 30% written off by the IRS. Yep, the whole project. So it doesn't matter where you put your panels. They're all going to work the same. And this is how it works. Now, you'd think that today most people would understand how solar works because it's everywhere, right? I got this text just the other day. Somebody answered an ad for me. This wasn't me poking around looking for something. Somebody answered my solar ad. And I said, well, how can I help you? And this is what they said. No, thank you. When the sun shines 24 hours a day, solar might actually work. That's not going to happen. So we'll just have to wait until solar technology improves enough to make it financially feasible. Really? Then why'd you answer my ad? I shouldn't go there. You know, the thing is, a lot of people, I guess, still don't understand how solar works. So let me answer that for you. Simple terms. When the sun beats on the home, it hits the panels, and that creates direct current, DC, right? It then either goes into an inverter on the panel, or it goes down into an inverter on the side of the house. There's different technologies, there's pros and cons for both, but just understand that the electricity is going to get changed from direct current to alternating current at some point so that it can work on your devices in the house. Everything we got in home from your refrigerator. And by the way, your refrigerator doesn't know the difference between solar power and the power that comes from a coal plant 300 miles from here, okay? So that's how it gets into your home. During the day, you're consuming the electricity that's being made by the sun. Obviously, that person that wrote to me was right. The sun doesn't shine all day long. Duh. And so we have to have some form of a storage device. Now, if you've got what's depicted up here and there's no battery, then the grid actually acts as your storage device. I'll explain that in just a second. But first, let's knock out a question that I always get at the very beginning. Hey, if we lose power in the grid, am I still going to have power at my home with solar? I live in Texas. A lot of people last year, when we got that bad snowstorm and didn't have power for a week or two, freaked out, and they wanted to have solar because they felt that it would give them the ability to overcome that problem. Well, what is the answer? Will I have power if the grid goes down? Well, it depends. If the grid is acting as your storage facility, then you won't. I know, that's not the answer you wanted to hear, is it? But if you don't have a battery and the inverter on your home senses that there's no power coming in from the grid, it turns off your power from the sun. Why is that? Well, it doesn't turn off the sun, obviously. What it does is it just lets the power dissipate up there on the panels. But, be that as it may, if the inverter doesn't sense electricity coming in from the grid, it turns off your home so that you can't send power out to the grid. The reason is, let's say that some kid down the street ran into the telephone pole, knocked it down, and that's why the power's out, right? And your electric company sent somebody out to work on the grid, or work on those telephone lines, right? The power coming off of your solar panels would kill that lineman just as quickly as the power coming from 300 miles away in a coal-burning factory, right? So that's why it's automatically turned off. But if you've got a battery in your home, then what happens is when there's no electricity coming in and the inverter senses that, nothing's coming in from the outside, the inverter shuts off the outside world and your home from the outside world. It starts drawing power from the batteries that are in your home, and then you still have electricity. So will you have power when the grid goes down? It depends on your storage, not on your panels. How does that work? Net metering. Back when I was a kid, most of us, we saw that disc that just went around and around and around, right? It just went in one direction. Well, today we've got what's called a net meter. Net, meaning what you export and what you import. It's looking at the net difference between those two. And so we have different codes that tell you what you are exporting at any one time. So you'll see number 24 there. That's just a code that Rocky Mountain Power uses. Your company might use a different one, so you don't have to memorize that. But this code tells Rocky Mountain that this is the amount of energy that this family has exported to the grid. In this case, 718 kilowatts. The system had only been turned on for a few days when I went over to look at that. And then the 14 that you see is how much they've imported. All right? So in this family's case, 718 they've exported. Now, that doesn't mean that's the total production they've made, right? Because they were still consuming inside their own home. So over and above what they needed to get through the day, they exported 718. They've had to buy at night 462 as an import. And so, as I just said, the grid is acting as their virtual battery. It looks at the difference between the 718 and the 462 to get them their bill. So in this case, this family would have a credit at the end of the month. That's August. What happens in December? It's going to be just the opposite. Now they're going to import more than they're exporting. And so all those credits that have built up come back to help them pay the bill in February when they've got snow on their panels and they're not producing as much. And all that is calculated when we decide how big your solar system needs to be. Because we build a solar system to knock out your entire yearly consumption, not just August or not just January. Hope that makes sense. That is how the grid works. If you have your own storage, like a battery, then what happens is instead of sending your energy out to the utility company, when there's excess, it goes into your battery, and then in the evenings, when there is no sun, that electricity comes back. Batteries is one of those places where the prices have been going down. Batteries are now affordable, and you can put them on your system and knock out really the need to be on the grid. Don't get me wrong. You're still going to want to be grid tied or tied to the grid in case there's a real emergency or whatever, but you can really have enough of your own local power, both stored and produced for you during the day, that you don't have to suck much energy at all from the grid. And I'm excited about that. It's a new phase in solar because of that. This is what it looks like when you don't have a battery, what I was trying to explain a minute ago. I'm kind of a visual person. Everything underneath that green dome is production of electricity, solar production. Everything in blue, and you see it varies during the day, is self-consumption. So you see the amount of electricity this family used move throughout the day, which is fine. Up there, and you can't see it very well in this picture, but this family exported 15.33 kilowatts of power under that green dome. And then they imported, in the evening, during the night, and in the morning, they imported 10.83. So when you subtract that, the amount imported from the amount exported, we've got about, what, 4.5 kilowatts? If the grid, and that's the case here, there's no battery, so the grid or the electric company is acting as their virtual battery, the grid now owes them about 4.5 kilowatts of electricity. And if this, again, is August or whatever month, and they need that extra when it gets to December, that's when they'll get it back. Here's what it looks like with a battery. Again, under the green is what they produce during the day. The blue is their consumption, self-consumption. Then you're going to see in the evening that they had this spike there of consumption. What do you think happened at about 6:30 or 7? Everybody got home from work, right? Turned everything on. The air conditioner, the heater was kicked on, the kitchen, they started cooking, the lights got turned on, the TV, you get the idea. This is a peak time of day, about 7:30 in the evening, 6:30 to 7:30 in the evening is a peak time for electricity. And so their battery had to fuel all of that. And then in the evening and into the morning, they're still using their battery. This family has their battery set at 70%. So when the battery is at 100% at night, or in the evening, and it drains itself until early in the morning, probably about 7 o'clock in the morning, when it got down to 30%. Now you could set yours at 20% if you wanted to. This family happens to have theirs at 30%. So they only use 70% of their battery, and so in the morning they had to consume just a little bit of electricity. And so they ended up exporting 13.59 kilowatts, and they ended up importing about 1.3. That's the difference between having a battery in your home as storage and versus having the grid be your storage.